and welcome to That's Absurd. Please elaborate the science and, comedy-ish?
Funny, kinda?
Yeah, not laugh out loud funny, but maybe even. I feel like if we make somebody do that during the listen, that's a big win. That's a big W.
I agree.
Anyway, that and More Science podcast, where we take the most outlandish, ridiculous, silly, absurd questions from you, listeners, or each other, and then we actually do our best to find some sort of real answer for it. I am one half of the heh. I'm the first heh. I'm Julian Huguet. There it is. Yeah, you said heh.
I'm the second heh of the heh. I'm Trace Dominguez, and I'm also a science communicator. We, on this podcast, if it's the first time listening, I apologize for everything you've heard so far, and trust me, it's going to get better.
That's the opening. It's always a good sign where you have to start out with, if you're new here, so sorry about that. So sorry.
We're working on this intro. We'll get it one of these days.
We've been doing this a year and a half. It's going well. But intro over, complete, A+ work. So, Trace, what is your question that you are going to tackle for us this week?
I'm answering a question this week from Eline, who sent us some audio.
Hi, Julian and Trace. I am Eline. I am from the lovely village of Berchem in the Netherlands, and I've been a big fan of the show from the beginning. To help support the show, I thought I'd also send in a question.
Yay!
So, my question is, why do clocks go clockwise? When I was a student at university, I actually had a clock that went the other way, and although it took most people a little getting used to, everyone was able to read the time from it. So there's no need for clocks to turn the way they do. Now, I understand that it's just more practical to have all clocks go in the same direction, but what I wonder is, why this direction? Who decided and for what reason? My first instinct was that it must have something to do with sundials. If you put a stick in the ground, the shadow of the stick moves clockwise during the day. I realized, though, that this is only true in the northern hemisphere.
Oh, wow.
So if this were the reason, clocks in the southern hemisphere would go the other way, but they don't, do they? I'm very curious to hear where this question leads you. Thank you.
I love Eline. That was
wow.
Awesome.
Every step of the way, I was ready to be like, oh, cool, we'll get to talk about hemispheres. Oh, nope. Eline covered that too.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, so what are we going to talk about? We're going to have to turn the show over to Eline. They got most of the way there.
I love it when the listeners are they do the same things that we do. That is my favorite, because we read these questions in our database and then we start talking about them without getting into too much detail because we want to have some surprise when we actually cover them on the show.
Right.
But we sit down and we talk about them a little bit, and that's exactly what Eline just did. She basically did the same thing that we did when we looked at this question in the first place, it's just the best. It's just the best.
Yep.
I love our audience. Okay.
You're among similar nerds here.
That's right. Okay, Julian.
Yes.
Have you ever seen Taskmaster?
You know for a fact that I have.
I do.
You're the one who recommended the show to me.
Yes.
In the first place.
It's
a
excellent.
long time ago. Yes, I know you love Taskmaster. I have watched it. Yes.
Yes. Okay. For people who are unaware, it's 5 celebrity in the UK, not necessarily outside of the UK all the time, comedians who are doing random things assigned for them by other celebrity, mostly in the UK, people. It's a UK-based show. It's very funny. They do silly things. They respond in them in silly ways. Some of it's move this giant ball across a field, and some of it's go find this thing. And sometimes it's just really ridiculous stuff. So, for a friend's birthday, she wanted to do a Taskmaster for us. So we all came up with tasks and we did them. While I tell you my task, I want you to tell me what task you would do. So mine, in my head, we did a vacation rental in Palm Springs, and we all were sitting around to do this, what we called the Mob Olympics. And the Mob Olympics, because it was my friend Mary Beth, my task was to count to 60 in your head without making any noise and blindfolded. And then you're sitting in a chair. You have to stand up closest to 60 seconds without going over.
That's tough.
It was a tough one, but it was really fun. I actually forgot to say you couldn't make noise, so one of the other contestants, my friend Dave, started trying to mess with everybody by counting out loud, but differently than just figuring.
Terrible.
He would just lob a bomb in the middle and he would stand up and everybody would it was good. I was mad at him, but I was also like, but you did, that's good.
I respect, your That's part of the fun of the Taskmaster is seeing like the different strategies that people come up with, and they're wildly different from one person to the next.
Do you have a task that you would do?
I don't know why my brain did this, but all I could think that it had to be mannequin related. Like it had to involve like assembling the most mannequins or dressing the most mannequins or something. That's a little worrying that that's the first place that it went to.
It's a little creepy.
Listen, I don't know why. It just did. You were like, think of a task, and my brain went, mannequins.
Build a bunch of mannequins.
Build as many mannequins as possible, and they're just strewn about an open field, and you have to assemble them. And some cheeky comedian's going to be like, what if I just, put, like, not necessarily 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head on everyone? What if I just, like, gather the nearest things together and stick them on? And then, I would allow it if I were the judge. I'd be like, I didn't say it had to be...
assemble mannequins. Yeah.
Assemble mannequins. That's just me.
Wow. That's a really kind of messed up one, but I like it. I also like that they're scattered around a field, because then I imagine there's some other part of the task, like they have to sit on a tricycle the whole time or something.
They have to assemble as many mannequins as possible while riding... this tricycle.
Do not leave the tricycle.
And it's a very, like, rocky, pitted field that the wheels keep getting stuck in and they're falling over. I think this is good, frankly.
I mean, it's much more intricate than the one I came up with, I'll tell you that.
It's true. They tend to be very simple, and I think that's kind of the joy in the Taskmaster ones.
I love it. So the reason I bring this up is... because the human brain isn't awesome at time measurement. It's affected by our environment, by our experience, by what's happening around us, and also our things that like music. If you're listening to music or you're doing a task already, your time management is going to change. So humans, when we started pooling our resources and getting together, invented the clock, or a timekeeping device, really. It's one of the most important, oldest, and complex inventions humans have. And I honestly had never really thought about why it went clockwise until Eline asked this question. And then it was just like wheedling at me. I had to know the answer. I just want to lead with a little brief discussion of time. Time is totally made up. It does not exist. At least the measurement of it. Time exists, like radioactive decay happens. It was there, now it's not there, like there is objective measures of time. Energy moves through the universe. We can objectively measure heat moving from here to there, stuff like that.
Yeah. Entropy increases.
Right. The Earth moves, obviously, in the amount of time we've had in this podcast, like, 150,000 kilometers or something. So you can measure time objectively, but the way we measure it, the units we use, those are all entirely made up. We created them to have this shared experience. The word time, the etymology is from Old English, Proto-Germanic, Old Norse and Swedish. Probably comes from like Tima or Timon or Timi or Time. And it just maybe...
One of those is right.
Yeah. Maybe to divide is what it probably means. So you can only divide so much without help, though. And that's my point of like the Taskmaster thing. If you were to count to 60 in your head, you could maybe do a pretty good job. We have a pretty good grasp of time, most people. However, there were these experiments done by Huring and Mach in the, I think, 1860s, where they had a metronome that would tick back and forth. So if it were ticking fairly quickly, like tick, 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 you assume that that is one thing. You put it all together. However, if it ticks very slowly, tick, tick, tick. See how you don't perceive those? You're waiting in between for me to say another tick, but you're not like, oh, well, that's one unit of ticks. It's 3 different ticks, right? And those are some of the first studies of how we perceive time as people and in our brains. So each discrete sound of the metronome, when it's set to like tick every 3 seconds, is in a different temporal field within how we kind of perceive time, which is cool. And this is how music takes advantage of it to trick us into thinking these units of time are all clustered together. Where, like, you're listening to music and then the music stops and then goes again. And you're like, oh, that was so cool. Or, like, you can anticipate things happening because of the way music works and how they cluster different sounds together. And that's all just tricking our brain into feeling a certain way. I actually really like the clock chime example. If it bongs, 4 o'clock, you can probably just listen and be like, okay, it's 4 o'clock. But if it bongs like 10 or 11 or 12, you're like getting to the end, you're like, okay, I've had to count them now because it's taken too long and there's too many of them. So I had to be like, okay, there's been 4, now there's 5, now there's 6, and you just have to work your way through the rest of it. And that's the same idea. So initially we were dividing time into, I think we can all figure days. Right, clearly. We can divide it into days. Yeah,
that's an easy one.
Easy. Then lunar calendars allowed us to divide into months and days. And then seasons, of course, like we could get those. Those are pretty easy. And eventually we figured out years. And this is all super ancient history, prehistory, essentially.
Yeah.
And then we started looking at the stars to track things. So we could get all sorts of precision from that. But it still made it like we could get very precise in the number of days in a year, the number of seasons in a year, but the number of months in a year is dictated by moons. And so we have all this precision, but you can't get a lot more precise without a tool. Because the sun does move throughout the day, but knowing exactly where it is at any given time, you need a tool to be able to measure that. And so that's when we started to build things that would do this. And Eline hinted at this, the first was a sundial. Obviously, we use things like candles and oil lamps to measure discrete bits of time, but we weren't trying to track time across a day. We were like, oh, I need to do this thing for a specific amount of time. I'll burn this amount of oil. It'll burn at a pretty set rate. This was popular in the East, for example, in China and Japan and things. They would do this. Or with candles, same idea. They would mark the candle and they could burn them for a specific amount of time. But if you're trying to track a whole day, use the sun. So the first real clock was Gnomon? Gnomon? Gnomon! I don't know. Gnomon. Gnomon.
Gnomon.
Gnomon.
Nah, man. Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Do you know what time it is? Nah, man. I think the more time we spend on this, the worse it gets for us.
Yeah.
I think.
It was a gnomon.
Right.
It's the length of a shadow of a stick. So you have a stick, and then you measure the length of the shadow on the ground, and you can make little tally marks on the ground to figure out how long and basically divide a day into chunks. The oldest known existing shadow clock, as they're called, any guesses?
Ancient
Yes.
Antarctica. You weren't expecting that, were you? No, probably somewhere in the Middle East,
Yeah, ancient Egypt.
Egypt, yeah.
That's the oldest known existing one, but you're right. They were used prior to that, probably in ancient Sumer and other places. But the oldest known existing shadow clock to this day is an ancient Egyptian clock in the Valley of the Kings where pharaohs were buried, and it's just a simple sundial, the way that you would have one in your garden today. And it's a shadow clock made of schist, which is a green metamorphic rock, and it dates to the 8th century BCE. It's L-shaped. There are other ones as well. They're L-shaped, and you can place them east to west. So you look where the sun come up, okay, put it down, and then it kind of tracks the shadow length on the bottom of the L. And then when it's the afternoon, you flop it around, and you can do the same with the rest of the day. About 280 BCE, Aristarchus of Samos created the hemispherical sundial, also known as the hemicycle, which is super cool. It's like essentially a half circle kind of divot in a rock, and you put a stick on it, and so the shadow shines, or reverse shadows, into the hemisphere, and you can put lines on that, and you can tell what time of day it is. And the really cool ones had different arcs at different levels of the divot, because at different times of year, the sun would be in different places.
Cool.
And so it'd be like, oh, you're in winter right now, so you need this arc here. And it's not like you had to reset it or something. They just put the arcs in different places, which is just super neat.
It's a pain twice a year having to set your sundial back,
Yeah, just a real pain in the butt. The days are getting shorter. I guess we'll have to make it worse for everyone.
Sunlight settings time. Anyway.
But even at that point, they'd already decided 12 marks for the 12 different hours of the day, which is pretty cool. That was invented as early as like 3,500 years ago, 1500 BCE or so.
Do you know, is that related to when we talked about things being base 10 and time and stuff, like the knuckle bones or the finger bones in our hands? And us having 12.
It comes from like Babylonia and Sumeria and all of these ancient cultures that use these base 60 that we talked about in the earlier episode. So
very cool.
Yeah, they divided it into 12 parts for that reason. It was easy to subdivide. Also then 24 hours and then 60 minutes, which we get to later. We don't have those yet. So the Egyptians were dividing them using the sundials into 10 hours of the day, then 1 hour for dawn and 1 hour for dusk, and then 12 hours for night. And they marked them by decans, and we know this because we've seen depictions of it. I thought this was interesting. Cairo is about at the same latitude on the Earth as which major American cities? This is something that Americans are so bad at, and I think is so interesting.
I know. Latitude always trips me up, because I always forget that Europe is like a way higher latitude.
Yeah, it's way up there. Yes.
It's way up there by comparison.
Yes.
So I actually think it's going to be somewhere like Washington, D.C.
Even lower. Go lower.
Even lower?
Yeah.
Atlanta, Georgia?
Very close, like Tallahassee, Florida, which is a little south of that. Yeah. Austin, Texas, and New Orleans. Like, they're all kind of on the same latitude, and that's about where Cairo is, which I think that kind of blows my mind a little bit, because we think of Cairo as like way south by the equator in Africa. And it's Africa is pretty even with the south of the United States, which is pretty neat. So there also, I just want to point out, it wasn't always sunny in Philadelphia or anywhere, really.
I saw that coming. Okay.
So they created water clocks, which they would put water in an upper chamber and it would drip down or like run down into a lower chamber, and they could measure how much water the lower chamber had, and that would be like a clock. They're not super accurate. If you put too much water in, then it's more pressure and the time is wrong. Like you put too little water in, it's less pressure.
Thought about that.
And the time is wrong. So you have to be really precise about how much water you're putting in and then fill it up at the right time every day. So it's kind of more like the candles and the oil lamps and stuff. It's better for marking discrete time unless you're being very precise. Mm-hmm. So we've got sundials, we've got water clocks, we've got all these different things, and we're starting to spread this knowledge around. You know, the Greeks and the Romans and the Egyptians and these Mediterranean cultures are all conquering each other, and they're all sharing their knowledge through trade. And the Greeks have advanced math and geometry, and they're figuring out that you can do all of these different calculations to learn and make sundials and water clocks combined. So they had this thing called the Tower of Winds in Athens that was built in 50 BCE. And it was like multiple sundials combined with a water clock so that they would move depending on when they needed to be in a certain... It was very cool and interesting, and it's still there. And then, of course, the Muslim scholars had figured out trigonometry. So they actually used that to invent the sundial that we actually still use today.
Right.
The one with the triangle that's kind of at an angle. And that was all done thousands of years ago. So we already had that figured out.
That depends on your latitude too, right? The angle of the sundial.
Yeah, it all depends on your latitude. And if you're on the equator, it gets really messed up because it just doesn't work as well because the sun is like doesn't move the same way.
Sometimes right overhead, and then what do you do?
Right. And I don't want to be too Euro/Mediterraneo-centric. Ancient China also had figured out that their calendar wasn't accurate. They've been tracking things for hundreds of years, and in about the 5th century, they're like, hey, this is wrong. We got some incorrects here. And they realized that the Earth was wobbling on its axis based on their calendar that they'd invented. That is called precession, by the way. And the Europeans didn't figure it out for like hundreds of more years. And ancient China had already been like, no, we got to account for this in our calendar, which is cool.
Amazing.
Yeah, really incredible. And so let's fast forward a bit. There's a guy named Susung who made a clock in the 11th century that's 10 meters tall. It's about 30 feet tall. And it was so elaborate because it mixed some of the characteristics of a modern clock, because at that point they had invented the like ticky-tacky clock, which essentially it's like...
Is that the technical term?
Yeah, it's like got a name. It's like called it starts with an E.
Yeah, ticky-tacky clock. Totally
the ticky-tacky clock.
Yeah.
Basically, you have something where it's a gear and it adds tension and then release and tension and release, and that's what makes the tick-tock sound. And they built this thing 30 feet or 10 meters tall, and it had a rotating celestial globe, an armillary sphere for astronomical observations that moved and was accurate, and then different characters behind various doors that would open up throughout the day to ring bells or bang gongs or show the tablet of what time it was, and it was all water-driven, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. But that was like we started to peak, like technology, They end up with all of this stuff and it peaks and they're like water driven, still too temperamental. We need to figure something else out. And in the 13th century, Abu al-Ghassan al-Marakushi invented a way to make hours equal relative to astronomical measures, because that was still a problem. Because the length of the day changes over the year, which we don't really think about today. But in October, the days are 15 minutes shorter. And February, the days are 14 minutes longer. The day is longer. It's not really 24 hours. It's 24 hours is like some minutes.
Yeah.
And we're just like, moving on. Okay, let's go to the next day.
It's not an even 12 hours of daylight, you mean?
Yeah, the days are not an even amount of time. They change in length.
Right, there's more daylight some parts of the year, more darkness other parts of the year. Yeah.
Right.
Oh, I think we're all familiar with that now as we plunge towards winter.
So the hours of the day had to be shifted. And so this was the first time we'd removed clock time from the tyranny of sun time. Take that, son!
We don't need you for timekeeping, but we need you for everything else.
We need
please
you
don't
for
go
all
away.
of this other stuff, please.
Please.
We love you so much,
We
son.
love you. We love you.
But not in this one way where you're very inconsistent.
Yes.
But also consistently inconsistent, and we know how it works, but it's just a pain.
And it's really not even you, it's us, you know.
It's us, kind of. It's really a toxic and yet totally beneficial relationship. I don't know why we're so mad at you.
Gonna take a lot of counseling to work through our relationship with the sun.
But even after all this, we're into the 13th century CE, and we still don't have minutes because we don't need them.
Yeah.
It's not like the caravan train across the desert or the forest or whatever leaves at 3:43 p.m. on the dot.
Yes.
They're just like, we're going to leave this afternoon. We're going to leave at dawn, whatever. And you don't need to know how many minutes it takes to like sow a field or whatever. We just didn't need that kind of precision until about the 13th century when we invented mechanical clocks. That's not when they became popular. That's just when we first invented them. Mm-hmm. And it used a weight to do the ticky-tacky thing. I don't know why they added minutes. Maybe they were just like, it looks really blank without them. I don't know.
You know what I imagine? A couple use cases where minutes would come in handy, and that is when you are trying to standardize times like across distances.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of why we have time zones, was so, like...
Totally, yes. I was going to talk about that, yeah.
Yeah, like, trains in this area, this whole, like, section of the country, right? If it leaves at 12:05 and gets in at 12:45, like, everybody in both places knows what that means. And then also navigation, right? Especially if you're at sea.
Navigation.
And you need to know exactly what time it is, like at night, if you're taking a star sighting or something like that, to know exactly where you are in the world. I can see minutes actually being really useful in that case.
Those are both good points. And, just for observations potentially too, is one of the use cases I thought, like, it's important if you need to measure time, not necessarily know that it's 3:43 in the afternoon, but knowing the difference between 44 and 43, 43 and 45, those increments. If you have a mechanical clock, it's more specific, and you're able to do more and more specific things with them. And it was a gravity clock, essentially a weight, like a grandfather clock or like a lot of big clocks. They have a weight, and they would crank it up using tension and gravity, and they would just slowly pull things down. And then they invented the spring clock way later, and that made it so they could miniaturize it. But the main reason we had minutes is, what I wrote is, minutes only mattered to nerds. So you're welcome. Not only does everybody love nerds these days, thank you all comic books that people used to make fun of us. It's like basically keeping Hollywood alive. But also the literal minute. You're welcome.
Yeah.
Ancient nerds, they're the best.
I mean, the word even comes from like, oh, this is like a minute section of time, right?
Yeah.
It's even like minimizing the actual thing itself. Like, this isn't that important, but to us it is.
Right.
We love minutia.
We need it. We need it. By the 14th century, we started to see hourglasses. Also, again, about precision. And you could repeat it over and over again. So they would time it out using the clock in the middle of town with minutes.
Wait, the 14th century you start seeing hourglasses?
And sand glasses, yeah.
Okay, I almost asked when you brought up Cairo. I was almost like, what about hourglasses? And then I went, they're in the middle of the desert. Of course they had, like, sand as a timekeeping. No, apparently not.
I mean, so if you want to make a really accurate sundial, what do? Like the most accurate sundial. Most sundials are quite small. You know, you can either pick them up and take them or move them, or you have to change them.
Yeah.
But think of ancient Egypt, right?
I would make an atomic sundial.
Aren't all sundials atomic?
Isn't every clock atomic? You know, they're all made of atoms. No.
But I was thinking more like obelisks, these giant needles. The bigger, the taller the gnomon is on a sundial, the more you can see the movement at the very tip of the very tall stick. And so you could make little marks around your sundial, but then it doesn't move, and so it's not going to be right all the time, and it gets complicated. But you can. So what they would do is they would make this precision sand glass that would be, 2 minutes or whatever, and then they could time things more specifically. And gravity is constant. Unlike with a water clock, you don't have to put the right amount of sand in. It's already measured. Anyway, I want to go back to the question. So she wrote, if you put a stick in the ground, the shadow of the stick moves clockwise. But in the southern hemisphere, is that the same, or is it the opposite? You would think it'd be the opposite. And she is correct. In the southern hemisphere, it does move the opposite direction. The sun still moves from east to west, but you're on the other side of the planet, so it's just apparent motion on the sundial is going to be different.
Right.
And everything we've talked about so far has essentially been northern hemispheric, Eurocentric sort of, but Mediterranean-centric, North Africa-centric, right? We've got China, Arabia, Europe. We've got all that in the northern hemisphere. I wanted to specifically mention that Mesoamerican and Andean cultures also watched the stars, also had sun-based timekeeping. They had famously complex and detailed calendars that lasted for hundreds of years after their civilizations. And then there is, at Machu Picchu and a few other sites in Peru, there are solar stones that they can use that are essentially sundials. And then ancient sub-Saharan African cultures also measured time. The Ethiopians, who are neighbors to Egypt, they had sundials. The Swahili used lunar calendars. And in Kenya, really cool, there's this Stonehenge-style megalithic site, Nemoratunga, which is constructed similar to like Stonehenge to measure star movements and create a prehistoric calendar, which is super cool. Their sundials would have been moving anti-clockwise or counter-clockwise. So this sort of answers her question. The northern hemisphere is where we invented mechanical clocks.
Right.
We already had sundials, so did everybody. Everybody in the world, even Aboriginal cultures, all could use the sun to measure time, and they did. And the moon to measure months and days, and obviously they would do the same kind of measurements. But the mechanical clock that had minutes on it was invented in a place where the sundial went what we call clockwise.
Clockwise, yeah.
So she asked, who decided this and how did it come about? And no one decided. Well, maybe some clockmaker, whoever invented the first one,
Yeah.
But like at some point they just had to pick one. And that was the way the sundial moved. So perhaps that was a way to make people comfortable with it. They already knew how to tell time that way.
Yeah, just like she mentioned, when you have a anti-clockwise clock, you can get used to it, but it's still a little jarring.
Absolutely.
And so it's best to just take the thing that people are already familiar with reading and just like mimicking it and updating it,
Exactly.
It's a user interface design problem.
Yeah. If Apple had invented the mechanical clock, they would have called it revolutionary, and all the Android sundial people would have been like, that's not revolutionary. It's the same thing. It's the same thing I've already doing.
We've been
doing that on Sam dial for so long. Anyway, this is where I was like, Julian, you nailed it like 5 minutes ago, that different towns then had different times. So clocks were very expensive and difficult to make. So towns would put them up in the middle of town and they would set them by the sun, and they'd be like, okay, the sun's at midday. we'd use our sundial. Great, we got it. This is when it's noon. Set the clock to noon. And then they would just check it every now and then. But that meant every town, like every big town, had a different time. And that continued until like the 19th century, where like you'd get on a train in Philadelphia and you'd be able to move through time zones so fast that you'd get to Chicago and it wouldn't be like a time zone different. It would just be literally a different time of day.
They had time traveling back then.
Yeah. They're still actually using sun time is really what it was. We were using clock time, but we were still setting our clocks by the sun. So it was still really sun time. Sorry, sun. So they invented time zones and, that's a whole other story. Anyway, I wanted to mention before I wrap, have you ever thought about how clockwise isn't actually a direction? So if I'm looking down at a clock.
Right.
When you want somebody to do something, then they would say, turn it clockwise. It's from your perspective, looking out of your eyes, down at a thing.
Right.
However, if you're standing across from me...
On the other side of it,
if it's on a wall in between us, on a piece of glass, and you're looking at it too, when I turn it, I'm not turning it clockwise for you.
Yes.
Which is great.
I'm a very handy person and I like building stuff, and sometimes I'm like screwing things in and it's like, underneath and it basically flips the perspective. And I always have to be like, okay, I actually have to go this way to tighten and this way to but from the perspective of my hand, not from where I am.
Yes.
Then it drives me mad.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm intimately familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah, I think anybody who makes things with their hands, you probably does think about that.
This is a follow-up to remember can I describe to an alien what left is?
Yes.
It would be so much harder to do clockwise.
Oh my God, how would you even do that? That's such a mess. And then I wanted to dig one layer further from that then. Because when you Google clocks, you inevitably find that Gen Z and Gen Alpha can't read analog clocks, and this is terrible.
Kids these days,
they can only read the digital clocks.
Yeah. These baby boomers and Gen Xers, they don't know how to use an abacus anymore. What's the world coming to?
Yeah. So when I was in my master's program, I took a class called International Public Relations. It wasn't what I thought it was going to be about, but I learned a lot. And there are different ways when you're making an ad campaign or a public relations campaign for a different country. You have to think about how that culture of that country or the people who live there, how they perceive time. Because if you make an ad for an American audience and you air it in Mexico, it won't perform as well. The people of Mexico have culturally a different experience or a different interest in time. You air an ad from Japan in Germany, that might work well. You air an ad from Russia in Ethiopia, it probably isn't going to work well. And it doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the way people look or even necessarily the way people act. I would say it's actually the other way around. Let me explain what I'm talking about. Within time, there are different ways to perceive it and think about it. Westerners and some Asian countries tend to think of time as monochronic, which is we look to the future, we care about punctuality and tasks and doing those tasks individually and serially at a time, and we make lists and do detailed plans just as a culture. Not every person does this, but like if you didn't do this at all, it would be very difficult to function within that culture. However, there's also a way to look at time, which is polychronic, which is less an emphasis on schedule and more an emphasis on getting the tasks completed in whatever order you need to do them, even jumping between them. And I think of this as like the difference between creatives and, accountants, but like it is culturally speaking also relevant, where like your lists are constantly in flux. The starting on time is relative. I think most Americans realize this when they go to like the Caribbean and everything's on island time. And they say, oh, it's going to start at 8. And they get there at 8 and they're like,
no.
Why hasn't it started?
No. I travel with my family through Japan, and my dad is from Spain, okay?
Yes.
They're not island time, but they're like, there's some wiggle room. And so, like, we're trying to get on the train in Japan, which I don't know if you know this, famously very exact about their train departure times in Japan.
Japan is an excellent example of a monochronic society.
So we're trying to get on, like, a bullet train, and it's leaving at 11:59, and my dad's like, great, so noon. And I'm like, no. 11:59
at 11:59.
We have to be on the train before 11:59. This is not negotiable. Yeah, so noon, right? No, 11:59.
I'm married to a Brazilian, so this is very familiar to me. But she works in finance, so she's very punctual about some things. Just this weekend, we were at the zoo, and I had to remind her by working backwards from when we needed to be somewhere. I'm like, well, we need to go somewhere, and we need to eat, and then we need to go to the other place that we need to get, and that's going to take this amount of time, this amount of time, and this amount of time, which means we need to leave in 5 minutes. And she was like, no. And I'm like,
yes.
But I'm just telling you, this is math. So that's just two ways to think about it. There's also different orientations, past, present, and future orientations, like traditional culture who like care a lot about history, ancestral stuff, traditional things. That is more like a Mexico, which is why I said that ad wouldn't necessarily work, because you're not going to sell a cell phone based on future technologies, because that doesn't really fly. They don't care as much as we do here in the United States, where we're very future oriented. Them, you would sell a cell phone by saying you can talk to your grandparents, you can talk to your family, you can interact with people, you can learn about your history. Whereas us, we would say, it's got the newest, the best, the fastest. That's just what we care about. And then there's a middle, which is the past is finished and the future is unknowable. So you should just go with the flow and focus on the present. And that's more in some African societies, very common. So anyway, that's just a few different ways you can look at time. There's also linear versus cyclical. Linear is like, time can be wasted. You start a thing and you end a thing, whereas cyclical is like every day is a new day and it just resets, and that's more like a Caribbean time. And then there's cultural differences, of course. So if you think of like Japan that you mentioned, they're very past oriented. They're also very monochronic and focused on future technology, but that technology is designed to improve life that you have now because life can be wasted. So it's just very complicated, but interesting.
There's another conception of time that I think about every now and then, from time to time.
Oh, wow.
Do you remember when we went to a science/comedy live show here in LA, and there was a Caltech professor as the final speaker, and he came with like a lot of different visualizations of time and stuff. And not to brag, but Trace and I were basically the only two people answering his questions during that show. If you remember, like he opened up with like an image of some line whizzing around a small space, Yeah. And there was like a little clock in the corner that was moving really fast. And he was like, what is this? And I'm like, that's light. And he was like, yes. How? And there were like 5 questions like that where like he was definitely like trying to blow the audience's mind, and every time you and I were just like, yeah, I know what that is.
Pouring cold water on it.
Like afterwards, he talked to us and he was like, do you guys do you work in science or something like that? This is like a Caltech professor. We're like, no, we're just big nerds.
Yeah.
But he did have one conception that I thought was really interesting. He talked about when you're scheduling a meeting or something and somebody writes back and goes, oh, that's not going to work for me. Can we move it forward an hour?
Yeah.
Say the meeting's at noon.
Yes.
Do you move it to 11 a.m. or to 1 p.m.?
Right. What is forward? Yes.
Right. And it's different from person to person, depending on whether you think of time as something like coming at you or that you're moving through. Or it was really interesting to me.
It is. Yeah, that is super interesting. I'm really glad you brought that up, because I had totally missed that in my research. But this comes back to this idea of how we think of time and how different cultures think of it. But then within those cultures, individuals have different perceptions of it. I just think that's super neat. So to say that clock time is like this thing that happens to us, and sun time just happens regardless of whether we're measuring it or not, I think is really, really interesting. I wanted to end with this one thing. I was looking for some more information on this digital versus analog clock thing. And I found this blog by Mary D. Sklar. She's a ADHD researcher. And she was talking about how, like, ADHD brains, sometimes they don't have as much. They have what's called time blindness, where they don't even think about time when they're engrossed in a task.
Tell me about
it. Totally relate to that. Like, if I'm editing a video and it's been 6 hours and I'm just like, I should eat. Like,
oh, yeah. Oh, but where did the sun go?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like I look up and the sun is gone, you know? And so she actually cites this NPR interview with Richard Feynman about the impact of technological change on culture. And Feynman says that the digital clock is going to be the downfall of civilization. This is according to her. I couldn't actually find the soundbite. It was probably in the 70s, and NPR's archives don't go back that far that you can get online. And it also doesn't really sound like the Feynman that I've read. He doesn't usually talk that way in my experience.
Not quite doom and gloom from the lectures I've heard, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I think maybe she's remembering it, and that's a more punchy way to restate it. I'm not going to attack her for that. But I do think it's interesting because she goes on to say that the digital clock only shows us now. Whereas an analog clock, you see now, you see where the hand was, and you see where the hand is going, so you just think about time differently. And I thought that that was super cool.
That is cool.
Because I have always thought about that change, and like, I've read so much about the analog digital shift, and I've never heard it put that way, which I thought was really, really neat.
I just can imagine some very new age person with a bunch of only digital clocks in their house because they live in the now. You know?
Live in the now.
I'm all about this moment.
Yeah, that's me. Just living now.
Yeah.
You know?
I don't have a doctor's appointment scheduled this year because I live in the moment. The concepts of regular checkups means nothing to me.
Julian, you have it in half an hour.
Don't know what that means.
What does that mean? Yeah.
Don't know. I'll only know when I get there. If I get there.
You have it at the top of the hour. That's when it is.
I wonder how much language also affects this because, like, for example, Japanese does not have a future tense. There's only present/future and past.
Yeah.
And that'd be another interesting. We've gotten into a lot over a very simple, like, mechanical question about. Like,
yeah, I mean, I could have answered the question in 2 minutes.
You could have, but that makes for bad podcast fodder. Yeah,
that's true. It makes this episode very short.
Yeah.
But I really liked the question because it makes you think about all the ways that time, as we measure it, is totally made up. So when things are totally made up, they are made up by people, and then we end up tweaking them to make sure that they fit as many people as they can. But ultimately, clockwise happens because that is how the sun moves in the place that invented the clock. And that's really the bottom line.
Yep.
But when you really dig into why it matters and what it can affect, in the UK, they say 9:30, and that means 9:30. Whereas in the US, we would say 9:30, I guess.
Half past
or like
9.
Half past, because we're implying that it's in the past. But anyway, yes. I don't know how to wrap this up other than to say time to wrap it up.
Yeah, you're running out of time, so you have to stop. That's it.
I guess clockwise is really sunwise.
In the Northern Hemisphere.
So couldn't we call it Northern Sunwise and Southern Sunwise?
Yes,
instead of clockwise and anti-clockwise.
We've fixed this problem, this Eurocentric.
We fixed it.
Historical artifact.
We've solved
Great
it.
news, everybody. We've made the world a little bit better today.
Just ponder that.
This will make no sense. Please, can we start something? Can we just see? I feel like it so rarely comes up that people say spin this clockwise or counterclockwise or whatever.
Yeah.
But like, what if we, as this tiny army of listeners, just pretend to have no idea what that means? And then when they illustrate, be like, oh, you mean North Sunwise.
North Sunwise.
North Sunwise. Oh,
that's
of
North
course.
Oh, gosh. So it's...
Now, South Sunwise, I go the other way.
Yeah. If you want to tighten something, it's North Sunwise
North
tighten.
Sunwise. South Sunwise Lucy.
Perfect. I think we fixed it.
We solved this problem, and I'm proud of us. It doesn't have to be a lot. But, you know, so long as you're getting things moving in the right direction, which is North Sunwise, The correct sunwise direction.
North sunwise direction.
What did they call that rotational direction before clocks?
That was in part of the research, and nobody knows. They're like, I don't know, left.
Sure hope somebody invents a clock soon.
All right, well, let's take a break, and we'll come back with another question. Julian, give me your best dinosaur roar.
Oh, God, an asteroid! It's horrible!
Wow, that was not where I expected that to go. We're popping in before the show to tell you about I Know Dino. It's a dinosaur podcast.
You know, we think of those dinosaurs being this thing that's been dead for tens of millions of years. Even so, studying dinosaurs can still teach us stuff that is relevant to the world today.
Yeah, like climate models to help us understand global warming.
Migration patterns of dinosaur lineages, they tell us about Earth's changing continents.
We can also study dinosaur diets, what plants lived then, and maybe what animals and how they interact.
And, this is super cool, many dinosaur injuries, paleopathologies, they're the first known occurrences of diseases.
And they talk about all this kind of stuff on I Know Dino. It comes out every week with new dinosaur stories that you're not going to hear anywhere else. Like, I hadn't heard of a lot of these, which is pretty cool.
You can find I Know Dino on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever podcasts are. And if you found us, you can probably find them. Go check them out.
Welcome back to another episode of That's Absurd, Please Elaborate, the second half. One could say it's the first half if you think of time backwards. But we don't. Maybe we do. I'm not sure anymore.
If you're in the Southern Hemisphere, this episode plays backwards.
Yeah, that's a little-known fun fact
little
about
known
podcasts.
fact about podcasts, yeah.
Yeah, they play backwards in the Southern Hemisphere. It's really interesting. Julian, you have a question to answer, right?
I do. My question this week comes from Ida, who sent in a recording.
Hi, I'm Ida, and I'm from Stockholm, Sweden. And my question is, if you had a very long stick and used it to poke a person on, let's say, the moon, would they feel the poke before they saw you poking? Or rather, why wouldn't they? Since I suppose that I haven't found a way of breaking physics. So, to give some context, I had a dream where I was the poker, so to speak, and it all made sense back then, as things usually do in dreams. But when I woke up, I understood that since nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, in a vacuum, blah blah blah, it was physically impossible, as things usually are in dreams. But I couldn't wrap my head around why, since the front end of the stick should move simultaneously as the back end. Or so I thought. Well, I decided to ask you guys for help. Love your show. Bye!
We have, like, the smartest listeners. I'm not just pandering, but I love that Ida had a dream and then, like, very clinically analyzed it afterwards. Like, well, there must be something amiss here.
We would get along. Yeah, we would get along. When she said, in a vacuum, yada, yada, I was just like...
I felt that in my soul as a science communicator.
Yeah.
Because, like, it's the listener to just give you a little peek behind the curtain, like, all the time we are balancing, like, accuracy versus concision. You have to say something that is accurate enough without going super into the weeds, because you can always go deeper. But, like, no matter how much you think you've basically covered everything, somebody in the comments section will pop up and be like, well, you didn't consider this specific scenario. And you're like, I know. Yes, you're very smart. Thank you. So, like, when she says speed of light in a vacuum, blah, 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 I'm like, yes, perfect. You know what it's like.
Yeah.
Also, one thing I want to include, that in Ida's email, she concluded with, if you poke somebody, you know, and it does travel faster than the speed of light, the way of transmitting information, would that solve anything?
Yes! Yes!
We're at the point where I feel like we should just change the podcast name. Like, they've organically come up with a better title for the show than we did.
Would that solve anything?
Oh, it's so funny to me.
Maybe that should just be the subtitle. That's absurd, please elaborate. Would that solve anything?
Maybe we'll have, like, mini-sodes where, like, we'll explore the concept and then, like, a little bit extra where we go, like, and here's what it would or would not solve.
Honestly, we should definitely do that. That's a great idea.
Okay. So, as it is aware, right, speed of light, the ultimate speed limit for things in the universe, when it's traveling through a vacuum, because if it goes through a medium, it does slow down. Well, light, I mean. Things with mass cannot achieve the speed of light. Light goes that top speed because it is massless.
Right.
There's really fascinating history in how we figured that out. Before Einstein, we used to think maybe light was traveling through some medium called the ether, because other things that are waves travel through media. So if it's traveling through the ether, maybe it'll go slower in a particular direction because, the Earth is spinning and maybe the medium's spinning with it. And so it'll go slower, like going east than it is west. And then we discovered that wasn't true and that it's always going the same speed in a vacuum and that it doesn't matter, like, where you're observing it from or what speed you're traveling when you observe it, it still goes the same speed. And it led to special relativity, and it really blew people's minds like 109 years ago.
I mean, it blows people's minds now. You shine a flashlight at the front of an airplane and it doesn't exceed the speed of light, and people are like, wait, what?
Yeah. Or like you travel in a spaceship going 99% light speed and you turn the lights on. The light still travels away from you at the speed of light. Like, it's all mind-boggling.
It's nuts.
It's very cool. And funny enough, because of this realization of how the speed of light is constant no matter where you are as an observer, that led to us realizing that time is not as exact and precise as we used to think it was, and that it changes based on the observer. Yeah, and that clocks actually run at different speeds depending on how close they are to a massive object or
how fast they're moving. I put some stuff like that in the previous answer, and then I was like, no, this is too much.
No, it's too much, right? But this is why, so satellites, talking about timekeeping being important for navigation, GPS satellites have atomic clocks on board.
More than one.
Yeah, and because they're traveling at high speed but farther away from the gravitational body that is the Earth, they have to account for their time being different than the same exact atomic clock here on Earth.
Yeah.
Or your GPS result would be off by several meters.
It's amazing. If Einstein hadn't thought that up, we would not have GPS.
Yep. It wouldn't be as good. We'd be like, why can I not, dial in this GPS more accurately? I want, when I'm hunting the Pokemon, it keeps thinking I'm over here when I'm clearly next to this Pokestop. And it would be tragic. So if you like playing Pokemon Go and participating in gym raids, thank Einstein for that.
Thanks, Einstein. Wow, that was a rant, and I loved it.
Quite a tangent. Okay, so light has a finite speed. It is a little under 300,000 kilometers per second, which is, of course, very, very fast, literally the fastest anything can travel, but it is not instantaneous. And of course, for you and I, here on Earth, where things are relatively close to us, that doesn't make a big difference, The time it takes for the light bouncing off of something to reach your eye is so minuscule, you can just discount it.
Right.
Like, I play hockey as a goalie. I'm never going to say, like, they scored because I thought the puck was somewhere else.
Yeah.
The time it took for the light to reach my eye and brain to process made me... No, I'm just not good at it, okay? That's it. That's the truth.
I think you're probably pretty good, though.
Well, thank you. Okay, so... It's not noticeable for us, but at cosmic scales, it becomes noticeable. So light travels a little under 300,000 kilometers a second. The moon, on average, because, depending on its orbit, it'll be closer or farther, but on average, it's 384,400 kilometers away, or 239,000 miles, give or take, right?
Yes.
So that means light is going to take, on average, about 1.3 seconds to reach the moon from Earth or vice versa. And you can see how this, introduces complications with like missions to the moon, right? When astronauts were first training and they were simulating that delay in the simulators, they had to get used to the fact that it would take over 2.5 seconds round trip to send a message and then hear the answer. That introduced a lot of problems for them initially, and getting used to that was a big part of that training.
Yeah.
So, Uda's question kind of initially makes sense, right? Let's imagine I have a 338,000 kilometer long stick and I poke somebody with it. Should they feel that poke instantaneously, and then imagining they have like some amazing telescope or something, or a TV camera sending a signal to them on the moon, and they're watching me poke them. I don't know why I'm the poker in this scenario, let's say.
No, you don't want to be on the moon? I feel like you want to be on the moon.
Listen, I'm going to get into some math that'll make it clear that you would rather be the poker and not the pokey in this scenario.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Okay. So that signal from the television camera, which is traveling at the speed of light, will get to them 1.3 seconds later. And if the poke is instantaneous, right, that'll defy the laws of physics.
And get there immediately because I've moved this side.
Yeah.
And so it should move at the same, because it's solid.
Right. Now, there are multiple ways to approach this. And a lot of times when we talk about like paradoxes and traveling faster than light, I feel like some answers are cop-outs. You know?
Wow.
Like,
shots fired.
I know. When we talk about quantum entanglement, right? When you make two particles that they seem to have corresponding, spins, right? Spin being a property of particle. If one particle has a left-handed spin, the other will have a right-handed spin. Or if it's spinning, let's say, north sunwise, the other will be south sunwise. And then if one flips, the other will flip.
Right.
The interesting thing about entangled particles, after you create some, which honestly, I'm not totally sure how that's done, but it's doable. You can create them. You can separate them by a vast distance.
I think what you mean is when you entangle two particles, blah, blah, blah.
Yes, yeah. So let's say you entangle two particles from physics, blah, blah, blah. And then you can separate them by a vast distance. And if the spin of one flips, the other one will flip instantaneously. And famously, this was something that Einstein did not think made any sense, right?
Spooky action at a distance.
That is exactly what he called it, spooky action at a distance, because it seemed to defy this law about something going faster than the speed of light. And, there have been ideas of, well, what if we use this to send messages somehow? If we can encode, like, in the different spin states, information, then can I message somebody faster than the speed of light? And the reason that people say, no, you can't do that is, well, the information would just look like randomness, just things flipping randomly, and you wouldn't know until you received the actual message and compared the two that, oh, this is actually them sending a message and not the spin state just flipping on its own or something like that.
Right.
So that answer, I don't love it, but I don't know enough. I haven't done enough research or talked to enough experts that know about these things to find something better than that. And I think with some ways that you might approach this moon stick poking question, I think some of the answers are similar, kind of like, it's not quite satisfying enough. For example, do you have any freaking idea what it would take to build a 380,000 kilometer stick?
I don't, but having done the math for building a replica of a Lego sun, I can imagine it would be difficult.
Or when we got into like world's longest selfie stick, and even just like the pole that we saw those people holding, like breaking the record, had to have a structural point near the end anyway for somebody else to hold on to. I'm still mad about that.
Not to mention that since there's no tidal locking, you wouldn't be able to actually poke the moon because it's moving way too fast.
You'd have to catch it as it's going by. Well, you'd be going by because you'd be spinning around, 24 hours.
The stick would be burning up in the atmosphere almost. Not literally, because it'd be...
You'd be swatting satellites out of orbit as you flung around.
One of those tent things where you have the elastic and you're just like... Eep, eep,
yeah.
Eep, and it's just that.
Assembling that forever. To put that in perspective, the circumference of the Earth is 40,000 kilometers. So this poking stick is 9.5 times the Earth's circumference.
The moon is far, y'all. It's far.
Takes effort to get to. Okay, so I have no idea structurally how we would build this. And I feel like one kind of easy out would be like, well, we just couldn't build a pole that big. But no.
Yeah, that is an easy
out. No, that's absurd. Please elaborate. We have plenty of magic reserves available to us.
Correct.
We're going to just say we have a single long stick.
An alien has given it to us.
Yes, one long steel pole that makes it from here to the surface of the moon, okay? Now, I looked up how much mass a pole like this would weigh. right? If we have a solid steel bar that's about an inch in diameter, 25 millimeters, it has a mass of 3.86 kilograms for every meter in length. So multiply that by our 384 million meters between us and the moon, and that stick weighs 1.5 billion kilograms.
That's too many kilograms.
Yes, I know. I can hear your fingers typing the URL already. I will save you the trouble. You do not have to. You do not have to go to the measure of things.
I've confronted you.
You don't have to go to that website. I'm just doing this to save my own sanity. 1.5 billion kilograms, to put that in perspective, is about 1 9/10 as heavy as the Golden Gate Bridge. So almost 2 full Golden Gate Bridges.
That you'd have to poke with.
Yes, it's about 4.5 times as heavy as the Empire State Building, or about 150 times as heavy as the Eiffel Tower.
Wow.
Okay.
That's a lot. Also, I didn't realize the Eiffel Tower was so light in comparison to the Golden Gate Bridge.
I know. It's hard to think of things at large scale, isn't it?
Yeah. Our brains are really not made for that.
We're not good at that. Okay, so if it's that massive, think about how much force it would take to move it.
Whoa.
Force is mass times acceleration, right? So even though we're not moving it very far or very fast because it's very, very massive, it takes a lot of force just to move it a little bit. So let's say, Ida is the pokey, because again, I have done this math and I do not want to be the person on the moon for this. So congrats, Ida, on being on the moon. Now you will be poked with the giant stick.
With consent.
With hopefully. Send in the question. We're gonna. If you read the fine print on the Notion
You've
form,
consented to being part of the hypothetical solution.
Very expansive fine print. I'm so sorry we tricked you into doing that. Okay. So if you get poked, let's say the stick starts 1 inch, 25 millimeters away from Ida, and we poke them, and we want to beat the time that it will take that signal to travel. We want to poke them before the actual, light from us poking them, starting to poke them, will reach them. So let's say we do it in 1 second, which also makes my math really easy.
That does,
well,
yes. Great.
If you have to move 25 millimeters in 1 second starting from a standstill, that means you accelerate at 0.05 meters per second squared, which when multiplied by our 1.5 billion kilogram pole means that has a force of 75 million newtons.
That's a lot of newtons. Just to get it going. Just to overcome the inertia?
Yeah, just to accelerate it to that speed with that much mass. So if you're on the moon's surface now, what does that do to you? Because that force is going to get transferred to you.
Oh my God.
I think it's more useful to think in terms of energy in this case. So how much energy does our giant pole have by the time it hits you, traveling at 0.05 meters per second? Well, it's going to have a kinetic energy of 1.875 million joules.
That's a lot of joules.
To put that in perspective, which is actually kind of surprising to me, that is about the same amount of energy released when you blow up 0.5 kilogram of TNT, or about 1 pound of dynamite.
That's less.
That's not a lot, but remember, kinetic energy, the formula is 1/2 mass times velocity squared, so velocity makes a big difference, and our velocity is very slow in this instance, right? That said, Trace, if I handed you 0.5 kilogram of TNT and then lit the fuse...
It would not be good for me.
And all the energy was going to go into a spot on your body that has the diameter of 1 inch. Do you think that would go well for you?
If I was in 1/6 gravity?
Oh, I thought about that too. I don't think you'd achieve escape velocity.
Oh, yeah, I was going to say.
I didn't have time to do the math that completely. But I think more likely, this is like we talked about with Tom Scott with the hockey goalie, getting hit with a puck that could theoretically knock them back into the goal. It would become less a question of physics and more of biology, right? I think that would blow a hole straight through you.
I think it would be one of those cartoon things where I would be like, Yahoo! And I would be just gone. But you wouldn't be able to hear me, of course, because there's no
air, so no sound. Yeah. Because that wave needs a medium. I also thought comedically, like, what if the end of the pole was like a big flat plate to spread the pressure out and it just like punted you?
Yeah, yeah.
But more that's just a funny image for me. But yeah, a giant pole just moving a stick, still a lot of force, a lot of energy.
I do have one question.
Tell me.
What if I'm poking you, but I'm accelerating and decelerating?
So by the time it hits me, it's going very, very, very slowly?
Very, very, very slow, so it just feels like I'm just boop.
Or like, what if it already starts right next to us and pushes us? I didn't do the math on that, I'll be honest. But still, imagine the mass of basically 2 Golden Gate bridges getting pressed against you with any amount of force.
Yeah.
And again, on some part on your body where it's a 1-inch diameter circle.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
A lot of mass pressed on a very small area.
It is moving at that when it touches you. So, because we're not decelerating it. So it's moved that very low velocity, but it's got that much energy behind it. It's like a cargo ship hitting a bridge.
Oh, yeah, that happened. Anyway, another answer that I do not think is satisfying, that I think a lesser podcast would try and give you.
That's ridiculous. Please tell me a little bit more.
That's amusing. Continue a bit.
That's amusing. Say more.
Yes, that's amusing. Say more. TASM.
TASM. Our now hypothetical, less good.
The mini podcast. Our competitors.
Our fictional competitor podcast.
With Justin and Quattro.
Our D-string podcast. Still Aaron Aronson, though.
But not, Aaron Aronson's son. So, but no. That, I think, is still a workaround that I do not accept. We still have to obey the laws of physics somehow. We can't beat the speed of light. What's happening here? The fundamental problem that we have with this scenario that we've dreamed up is the assumption that both ends of the stick move at the same time.
Yeah. Isn't that what Oda said in their question? They said, I move the stick and instantaneously the other end moves.
Right. And again, this is like the same way that here at our local scale, light moves so fast that it may as well be instantaneous. Well, if you have like a meter-long stick and you poke something with it, it might as well, to our human perception, which as we've covered does not handle very small, minute segments of time well, might as well be instantaneous. It is not.
So, what's the speed of stick?
The speed of stick is the speed of sound through that material.
Huh.
Think about it. When you push on one end of a stick, what's really happening is all the molecules, all the atoms in the stick, they feel that force from you pushing, from where you're pushing.
It's a pressure wave.
They bump into the atoms, next to them, and they bump into the atoms next to them, and they bump into the atoms next to them, and it propagates through this material. Well, what's it called when a bunch of atoms send a longitudinal wave through some medium?
Yeah. It compresses and then expands, and compresses and expands, and compresses and expands.
That's just sound.
And it just does that for like 300 and some thousand kilometers.
Yes. A long, long way.
Wow.
So the speed of sound in this material depends on the stick's elasticity and the density. Relativity places an absolute limit on material rigidity, right? It cannot be completely rigid, and part of that goes back to the reason why light remains the absolute speed limit.
Yeah.
Because nothing can travel faster than it. And if you had somehow a theoretically perfectly rigid material, then you could send that information faster than the speed of light. And you wouldn't solve anything. You'd break physics as we know it, and we'd have to start over again.
I have a feeling I know why this is.
Why's that?
So you have to impart a ridiculous amount of energy to this thing, and it will still only, at the other end, translate to that 1-inch movement. It's still going to feel like I'm going to impart a bunch of energy, and it's all going to be absorbed in that pressure wave because it's not going to perfectly translate. You're going to get friction between the molecules over that length. You're going to lose energy along the way, and then eventually it gets to the other end, and it's just whoop. So you put a huge amount of energy in, and on the other end, you just get a boop.
In the real world, yeah. But still.
But that also explains the super rigid material would require so much energy that you would have to be accelerating it past the speed limit in order for it to work. So you put in a whole bunch of energy, and it still just doesn't go anywhere.
Well, but then the super rigid material, would it lose that energy? I don't know.
I don't know. Somebody nerdier than us, please tell me.
This is why a material cannot be perfectly rigid, because you would, theoretically, be able to break that rule.
Break physics.
Of light being the fastest, and you'd be able to, send that information faster than somebody could receive it through like a radio wave or visually observing it, right?
Wow.
And you would break this whole like cause and effect. It would look like the message had arrived before it was sent. And that's not how things work, dang it.
That's just not how it works, gosh darned it.
It's just because I said so, dang it. You can't do that. You're just not allowed. If you want a really interesting visual demonstration of that, if you don't believe me, because it is kind of mind-blowing, you can see that this is the case with a slinky. Have you ever held a slinky up and let it dangle and then dropped it?
Yes.
If you watch, from where you drop the slinky, that starts accelerating downward. But the bottom of the slinky does not also start accelerating with it, because this force being felt is propagating through this slinky at the speed of sound inside the slinky. So there's really cool slow-mo videos you can look up of people doing this. They hold up the slinky, they drop it, and you can just watch. Yeah, the top moves, the bottom stays the same place. I do somewhere.
Then let's just do it. I mean, it doesn't have to be right this second, but let's just do that. Your iPhone has a slow-mo mode.
Yeah. Okay, we'll do it later. We'll be like, what does this have to do?
We'll put it on our Instagrams.
What does this have to do with the speed of light and not breaking physics? Yeah, we'll film that. I have a slinky somewhere in this mess of stuff.
I have a kid. I'm sure he has a slinky in
He
here
must
somewhere.
have a slinky.
He has so many things.
I have to borrow this. Daddy needs this for physics.
I need it for the physics, kid. There are listeners who are waiting for this.
Yes. So, I hope that answers your question. This, again, much like your clock question, was like, this could be a short answer, but dang it, we're going to explore some interesting stuff along the way.
So much more interesting this way.
Some fun, interesting things. But yes, the reason that does not break the laws of physics is because the poke has to travel through the material at the speed of sound. And if it were something like, I found for iron, for example, the speed of that sound wave times the distance of the moon means that it would take about 18 seconds for that poke to travel from the poker to the pokey. So long after you would have seen them initiate that poke down on Earth.
That's pretty amazing. 18 seconds. And the speed of light one is like 1 point something seconds?
1.3 seconds.
Yeah, wow, that's pretty cool.
So you would see it start, and then you would feel the effect of it about 16 and a half seconds later.
So if there were a closed circuit camera where they could both see, they would see them poking. A second later, the person on the moon would see the poke.
Yeah.
And then...
Wait. Yeah, try and time 16 seconds right now sitting here with your eyes closed.
They felt it.
Wow.
I don't know if that was actually 16 seconds.
Another 1.3 seconds back the other direction for the poker to see the effect of it. Yeah.
That's very cool.
That's pretty cool.
Thanks, Julian. That was awesome.
Well, thanks to Ida.
Thanks to Ida for asking your question. And thanks to you, whoever you are, for listening to this episode of That's Absurd. Please elaborate. Of That's Pretty Neat. Could you say more?
Not to be confused with those other guys. Those lesser podcasts.
Hey, what's that about? Can you talk about it a little bit?
Our arch rivals. Cool. Say more, fam.
Wow, it's our Gen Z version podcast. This show, That's Absurd, Please Elaborate, was created, written, produced by me, Trace Dominguez.
And me, Julian Huguet.
It was produced and edited by the wonderful and wonderfully talented and fam who probably would poke us with a stick if it was that big, Kyle Sisk.
In the club, this podcast, we all fam. Producers, writers, editors. Special thanks to listeners who submitted questions featured in this episode. That would be Ida and Elena. If you'd like to submit a question, you can do that by looking for the form down in our show notes, or you can email us at hello@that'sabsurdshow.com. You can visit our website, that'sabsurdshow.com/ask. You can call us 302-TAPE-SHOW, that's TAPESHO, or you can stick your question on the end of a very long pole and then poke us with it, and we will get it, but slower than if it had been an email.
That's correct. Yes, because of physics. Special thanks to our new Patreon subscriber, Win. Thanks a lot for subscribing, and a shout out to our absurd administrators, Les and Adam. Leave us a review wherever you are listening right now. The reviews really do help the show grow. Even if it's just leaving us some stars or a thumbs up or whatever it is that your podcast platform allows you to do, that little action really makes a big difference for the show. So please take a second if you liked the episode and do that. And if you want to add words, that tell you other people why you like the show, all of that helps people know that it's worth their time. And it means a lot to us, and we read all those reviews, and we just get so excited, and we message each other, and we're like, oh my God, a new review, yay!
Yeah.
So thank you for that.
Listen, we all need a little kindness right now, and when we get it, it makes a big difference, so we appreciate it.
Thank you.
Finally, special thanks to those listening on Nebula. We've actually seen a few reviews from people saying, we've been Nebula listeners from the beginning, and that's also awesome and warms our hearts. Nebula listeners, you get access to ad-free versions of episodes, and you support us and other really terrific independent creators. It's an awesome network. To join Nebula, go to go.nebula.tv/that'sabsurdshow.
And remember, Julian, like we say at the end of every episode, if you're gonna poke someone with a stick, make sure it's northwise.
I would not like to be poked with 150 Eiffel Towers, please. Yes. Clockwise is a tyranny of the Northern Hemisphere technocratic institutions, and I won't stand for it. We're all going with sunwise directions now.
Sunwise.
That is it.
I've had it.
Let's just be people now. Let's just get off these dang analog clocks that are ruining the future. The digital clocks that'll ruin society, according to Richard Feynman, possibly. No more, I say. No more. Plus, clockwise won't make any sense once people all have only digital clocks, since the new people can't read them anyway. New people being the latest generations. I make it sound like they just showed up to a party, but you know what I mean.
But you know what they would understand? Sunwise.
Sunwise.
North sunwise and south sunwise. Because that, you could objectively test it.
All you need
just
to
go
know.
outside, stand in the sun.
Yeah, you don't even need a stick. You could just
there.
use your body and
put
some
your arm
free time.
North sunwise.
Just know where you are on the planet. Not even the latitude, just a 50-50 chance. Unless you're on the equator, then it means nothing to you.
Yeah, then we don't got anything for that, sorry. You're out of luck.
Then you don't need to build any IKEA furniture.
Just go to the beach.
Yeah, be on island time. Chill out.
Polychromatic, totally live in the present.
Like we always say at the end of every episode.
We say all that, word for word, end of every episode. I don't know if you've heard them all. You're gonna have to listen to them to know.
Yeah, go back. We'll prove it. Go back. Listen to another episode. We're serious. Do it right now. Go listen. You'll find it.
Thank you for listening. I hope you have a good day.
Yeah, me too.
Today.
Yeah.
And maybe tomorrow too.
Yeah. Whatever time is,
Whatever time is. Bye.